I wanted to divide section 2 into 2 parts so that the videos aren't too long. And that was a good place to stop for the previous video. So this one is continuing section 2, talking about the basic parts of the cell. And this is going to be for all cell types. And the three basic features that you find in all cell types is an outer boundary, an interior substance, and a control region. Now, when I say all cell types, I mean for both prokaryote and eukaryote, okay? So all cells, whether it's pro or eukaryote, have an outer boundary, an interior substance, and a control region. So I want to go through each of these 3 parts with you now. The outer boundary is called the plasma membrane. Another name for it is cell membrane. I honestly don't care which term you use, whichever one you like the best. I will interchange both of them because it means the same thing. Plasma membrane and cell membrane. Now again, with the inter versus intra, you see here intercellular space. So you see the double lines here and the double lines there. That's the plasma membrane. There's a reason why it's a double membrane, which I'll talk about in a later video. But all that dark gray area that you see here in the middle, that's intercellular space, meaning between 2 cells, okay? So this is cell membrane number 1, cell membrane number 2, and there's space in between. Okay, just talked about that. Now, the function of the cell membrane is to act as a barrier between the inside and the outside of the cell. It also controls what materials can enter or exit through it. And you can see from this diagram that there's a whole lot of structures that make up the plasma membrane, and they each have their own function.
Cell membranes have the ability to let some particles pass through, but not others. Because of this characteristic, they are referred to as selectively permeable or semi-permeable. Their basic structure is a double or bilayer of phospholipid molecules. These molecules align themselves so that their water-soluble hydrophilic heads face toward the inner and outer surfaces of the cell, while the non-water-soluble tails line up in the center of the membrane. This way, the 2 layers lie tail to tail, exposing the heads to water inside the cell and out. Cholesterol molecules wedge themselves between the phospholipid tails, stabilizing the membrane structure. Transmembrane proteins span the width of the membrane to transport nutrients and waste products into and out of the cell. Peripheral proteins are attached to either the inner or outer surface of the membrane. The glycocalyx, a fuzzy coat on the cell's surface, provides highly specific biological markers that allow cells to recognize each other as self cells, that is, cells that are a part of your body, as opposed to cells like bacteria that are not.
So I'll talk about all of that in a later video when I address specifically the plasma membrane, but just to draw your attention to some of the structures. So I did mention the 2 layers that you saw in the previous picture, like the double line. That's because we have these molecules called phospholipids. Now 10b, I talked about this in the last chapter, but 11a, you haven't had that. So just quickly, you have these structures called phospholipids, and it's made of a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. Now, what hydrophilic means is that hydro, water, philic, loving. So the head likes water, and hydrophobic is water fearing. So the tails, all of these tails on the inside, they do not like water. And since most of the outside of the cell and most of the inside of the cell is water, you have to have this double layer so that you protect the tails that don't like water. They're all protected in the middle against the watery environment on the inside and outside. Now, other parts we have, as she said, we have cholesterol. These are cholesterol molecules. And cholesterol just kind of helps to stabilize the phospholipids because phospholipids are quite fluid. So this gives a bit of a more rigidity, more of a structure like that can hold. Then you have these proteins. You got proteins that go all the way through that can act as channels, and you have some proteins that are only on the inside or on the outside. Again, I'm going to be talking about this in a later video. And then finally, you have these carbohydrates that are attached to some of the proteins on the outside, and these help to be kind of an identifying marker or like an ID tag so that your body can recognize like, oh, hey, this is one of my cells. I recognize that, so I don't have to attack it, specifically for your white blood cells. Okay, so that's the outer boundary. The second feature, which is characteristic of all cells, is an interior substance. This is called the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm includes a fluid. It also includes the cytoskeleton and all of the organelles except the nucleus. And again, with vocab, cyto means cell. So cytoskeleton is literally the skeleton of the cell, and it's made up of protein fibers. Again, that'll be covered in a later video. So everything from, if we have, here is our cell, here is our nucleus, everything from here to here is cytoplasm. Again, cyto means cell, plasm, jelly or gel, either one. So it's like the cell jelly. Okay. Now, I did mention that cytoplasm includes a liquid part and all of the organelles and the cytoskeleton. So the actual liquid part we call cytosol. Sol, like solution, right? So cell solution. This is the part of the cytoplasm that includes the molecules and small particles, but not the big structures, well, big relative to the cell. I mean, they're small relative to the cell, but big compared to, what am I talking about? You know what? Never mind. I don't know. Anyway, so this is a good diagram that compares cytosol versus cytoplasm. Of course, the nucleus we don't count at all, but the cytosol you see is just the liquid part, which is in yellow, and cytoplasm includes the liquid part and all of these structures, which are the organelles.
Cytoplasm is a clear, colorless substance that fills the area inside the cell membrane and outside of the nucleus. It consists of three main elements: cytosol, the thick, semi-transparent fluid in which all other cytoplasmic elements are suspended; inclusions, chemical substances such as nutrients or cell products like fat droplets or glycogen granules; and organelles, the structures that carry out particular functions for the cell. The first of these
Okay, so that's cytoplasm. And finally, the control center. Cells carry DNA for regulating functions and for reproducing. The DNA in some cells floats freely inside the cell. This would be your prokaryote. Other cells have an organelle that contains DNA. So these are your prokaryotes. And this is the nucleus. And that's for eukaryote. So for the eukaryotes, the control center is called the nucleus. You can see this is the nucleus, a very dark, large area of the cell, and it controls most of the functions of the cell. You can see from this diagram that you've got all of these squigglies. This is something called a nuclear matrix. It's basically a protein skeleton which helps maintain the shape of the nucleus. And the last two things you can see, there's a nuclear envelope. That's what we call the membrane of the nucleus. And of course, if DNA is inside but we make proteins outside, there has to be something that can take the information from the nucleus and the DNA and take it outside the nucleus to the cytoplasm where proteins are made. And those go through nuclear pores. And in biology, or in science rather, pore means hole. So you have these holes in the nuclear envelope that allow the information, the codes, to be taken from DNA outside of the nucleus so that you can make proteins outside. Okay, so this is the cytoplasm. This is the nucleus. You can see all of this dark, I don't even know what you call it, like strings or whatever. That's the nuclear matrix on the inside. Outside is called cytoskeleton. Just different names for the same thing. And then you can see nuclear pores here. And that's how things exit the nucleus.
And organelles.
Oop, we're not going to start that yet.